That was the drama, because by the time this gets posted, they'll be on something else.
Honestly, no, they'll probably be on the same thing, because the same argument happens, I swear, every, like,
there was
6
someone
months.
who posted, like, a video that was, like, the fall of MangaTube, and it's like...
Recently?
Yeah.
People get on my nerves. And I swear it's the same freaking... It's the same dudes, because it's almost always dudes.
It is always
They know who they are, because I have them all blocked on Twitter for a reason.
I was just like...
and I'm leaving this in, because...
I didn't say anything. I was
tired.
admiring the fact that my nails are once again too long to take a woman to bed comfortably.
Wow, of all the things... Oh, you know what? We didn't even do the intro, so...
No, we introed by talking about drama, because apparently we're Perez Hilton, but less gross.
Welcome to the Yaoi Shelf. Grab a seat and relax. Let's introduce ourselves.
My name is Amanda, also known as AichiYume. Do not talk about how bad I sound. I'm recovering from norovirus.
And my name is Aisha, aka MommaLuvsManga, and also aka Dumbho.
Today's episode is about censorship, which actually came about from our last episode, which is on webcomics, because one of the cool things about webcomics is that because the artists have taken the means of production to themselves, they can draw all the dicks they want, usually.
Yes.
Marxism, but for dicks. Like, typically because most webcomic artists host their own files and own their own domains, they can do whatever they want and not have to worry about censorship. But when you go through a company, censorship is an unfortunate thing that you will probably have to deal with and go through in some capacity.
Right.
We're going to try to keep this to a discussion of censorship in the boys' love space. Here's the thing with censorship, and I think it's important to keep this in mind, is that cultures have different views and standards on things. I think we have to agree to that.
Yeah.
And because of those different views and standards, that usually means that when art comes over, and that's art of any kind really, that things are gonna get probably censored. So definition: censorship is the act of editing, removing, or changing a work of art, that be fiction, pictures, whatever, to comply with social decency norms. Now that can change.
Right, because society's views on things changes, because we're human.
Yes. And the patriarchy still exists, so women can't have too much fun.
Right.
So those things can change. Like, I think we mentioned a few episodes ago, Japanese depictions of homoeroticism, it was not always negative until Christian influence.
Right, yeah.
So it really wasn't until the Meiji era that was then considered taboo.
Right.
Social norms had allowed it pretty much up until that point.
Right, yeah.
And then white people ruined it, which is, I think, the story of history. And then, have you seen that one GIF, and it's from Pocahontas, and it's like history summed up, like, these white men were dangerous. It's like, that's history.
It just, sometimes it makes you wish you could go back and just be like just travel back in time and be like, don't talk to them. Don't
go hide in the bushes.
Don't make eye contact.
But that's the big thing with censorship, is that it's editing, removing, or changing works of art. You'll see censorship with almost anything, and institutions are usually the thing that's doing the censoring. So I know for a long time it was the Catholic Church. I can say that because I was raised Roman Catholic. You can't say it to me because I will fight you. A lot of people talk shit about the Catholic Church. Most of it is merited, but just like with children, I can say my kid is ugly. You can't say my kid is ugly.
That's fair.
In the case of boys' love, it's usually publishing houses that are doing the censoring, or your translation houses, depending on how things go. So what kind of things get censored? Sex or sex acts, drugs or drug use, language, mostly profanity, but occasionally like slurs and stuff will get edited out.
Right.
Not often enough, because especially in Japanese, a lot of that stuff is super contextualized, so they won't catch all the references. Japanese is such a weird language to translate. I literally envy no translator.
Yeah.
Because the context of a word can change its meaning so much. Right. And unless you're, like, super, super expert level, like, you're not going to catch it. Like, there's some examples of, like, Inu and Neko being used, like, seme and uke. And there's like, a lot of, like, children's media that you don't catch.
Oh.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually has a lot of that, where, like, in that first season's arc with Kaiba and Joey, where it's like, oh, I'm going to make Joey my dog. There's a lot, like, they go out of their way to say that a lot, and it's like, so older BL fans are like, hello.
Interesting.
Right. So there's a lot of that turn of phrase that gets kind of blown over, because unless you have, like, that deep, deep contextual knowledge, like, you're just going to think, oh, he means, like, a literal dog. You'll also see, like, actually one of the places that first got me noticing it was Death Note with Matt and Mello. Because Mello goes out of his way to call Matt his dog. Like, goes out of his way.
Interesting.
And it's like, I have a very loyal dog. I have a very loyal dog waiting for me. And it's like, oh. Well then. Especially considering how little we see Matt do.
Right. That is...
So for him to go out of his way to say that he has, like, a loyal dog waiting for him.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Huh. And, like, unless you have that contextual knowledge, you just be like, okay, cool. That's a gay pet name they have. That's a weird way to talk about your friend, but all right.
Right.
That's a weird way to talk about two bros, but sure. But then you have that contextual knowledge.
Right.
And it's like, oh. Well.
Like, okay. Oh, I see.
Right. Violence usually gets censored. You get the infamous, like, fade to black. Fun fact, I bought some Inuyasha DVDs a while ago. And they're uncensored, or less censored. The sheer amount of blood that I just don't remember.
Oh, wow.
Because it was never shown. Like, it was never shown when Toonami was displaying it, or it wasn't shown that much. And it's like, this is so much more graphic than I remember.
Right.
Ah! But again, that's because of audiences. And then crime will usually get censored some. It just depends on the crime. Usually, for whatever reason, there's still not a ton of talk about, like, drug use and stuff like that, or, like, drug crime in manga.
Right.
I think, like, the only time that I saw it recently was at Sarazamai, where there's a very, very brief mention of selling marijuana, and I was like, this is, I think, the first time I've seen that, like, in anime.
You know, it's interesting because for the longest time, I was under the impression that, like, no one in Japan even, like, had access to weed, because I'd never really seen it depicted. And I, like, now that you say that, I'm like, yeah, I've never seen it in a manga or an anime. So
right, like, I genuinely never seen. I was very shocked that it was like, oh, we're talking about a drug deal, and that's the product. Cool.
I mean,
like,
I assume it happens because
it has to.
Drug dealing happens everywhere. So, yeah, I mean, it would be naive of me to think that it doesn't happen. But, yeah, just Japan they've done a great job of, like, controlling the narrative of their...
Well, also, the U.S. has done a great job of hiding what it thinks we don't need to see. Like, we could have an entire conversation on 4Kids and trying to make anime less gay, because apparently that was bad. So things get censored again because cultures are different. And sometimes that means that something that is okay in one place is not okay in another place, for better or worse.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to say that that's universally bad or good.
Right.
Because real talk, there's probably a lot of stuff from the U.S. that goes to Japan and it's like, we need to cut this shit out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So we need to talk about censorship and boys love. And this is a note mostly for me and some of the old guard. I think some of us do still tend to forget that yaoi is porn.
You know, okay, I'm not counting we already know I'm not counting myself in this, but because like, although I am older, I'm a newer fan. So for me, yaoi especially, I mean, if you're someone who denotes like BL as the softer stuff, the more innocent stuff, and yaoi
if boys
as
love
explicit.
is the umbrella, shonen ai is kissing and heavy petting, and yaoi is they fuck. Right.
So if you think of it that way, yaoi has always been porn to me, and I've always approached it as such. So I think that's a big reason why, like, for me, the ghost penis thing has been very annoying. Because I'm just like, I'm here to see freaking penis. Like, well, it's porn. I want to see it. But I also understand because it is porn. Yeah. And it's being sold. This is a train of thought that I had earlier while I was cleaning. So I think about the fact that a lot of yaoi is sold in just regular bookstores. You know what I mean? Where although they do have like the parental guidance thing on there, I don't think I've ever been ID'd, which granted I clearly look older than 18, so maybe that's why, but I've never been ID'd for like the manga that I've bought, even when it's been explicit. So it makes me wonder, like, how easy is it for people under the age of 18 to...
Okay, so here's some story time from back in the day. I do remember getting ID'd at Borders.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, Borders was the only store that would sell it. Barnes and Nobles was too on their high horse morally to sell it. Even though they'd sell, like, Hustler and Playboy and shit, but we're not here to talk about that.
Right. Yeah.
We're not here to talk about that. So I do remember getting ID'd at Borders, but what you did is you had that one friend who was older, or that one friend whose parents didn't love them, and they would just buy whatever. And I had that friend, her name was Ashley, where her mom didn't love her, so it was just, Mom, buy this, okay. And then,
oh my gosh, poor
so
Ashley.
You have that one drug mule friend,
right?
Or you pirate.
Right. Yeah, I guess because it's like because I can kind of understand why publishers would want to censor things just in case a younger person gets a hold of it. But then I can't help but wonder, like, why go through the trouble of getting the license for something only to censor it and then inevitably annoy the shit out of the fans who are buying it.
So I think it's weird because as much as I say that yaoi is pornography, there is a very small tangent of the audience that consumes it that way.
Yeah.
So I wonder, because like again, like I know for me, the sex is usually almost ancillary most of the times. So the censorship is annoying because it usually just like breaks up the flow. But like the last thing I'm thinking about sometimes are the dicks.
Okay.
So I wonder how much of that is kind of like looking at the fan base and being like, look, real talk, as much as we say this is 18 plus, there's literally no one who's 18 in America who's reading this. There's literally not a single 18-year-old in America who is reading this. Like, that's
fair.
So and I wasn't at June or DMP back in the day, so I can't say that, but also it's not. It's weird because it's in a different category of pornography than like Yuri and stuff. Because like I don't think that most of the fan base views it that way, which is why I made that point to bring it up.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you really asked like my generation of yaoi fans, like I think so few of us just saw it as pornography, which is like it was so. I have to remind myself sometimes because I remember like back in the day, like throwing these books at my friends, like, look at this. And it's like, oh, that's a sex scene. Like, that's a crime. Like, don't make people ingest this stuff. But like, we just didn't see it that way. It wasn't what that was for us. So
yeah. Well, and I have noticed that about the fandom because like for me, I've honestly, so like some people will separate like yaoi and hentai.
Yes.
To me, yaoi is hentai. To me, because that's like, again, I'm going into it for like, you know, with a specific idea or purpose. I've read enough hentai. I've read more hentai than BL, I think. But, you know, I've read enough hentai and enough BL to kind of feel like, yeah, I see them, or not BL, yaoi specifically, to feel like I just don't really understand why in a lot of, like, I can read hentai and it's not, you know, it's not censored depending on who you're buying it from, I think.
Right.
But, you know, a lot of the time where I buy it from, it's not censored. So I'm just like, okay, well, maybe there's more to censorship than just we don't want people to see it. Like, maybe it is just a money thing and like wanting to have a larger audience that they could like reach, because when you think about hentai, first of all, hentai already has a negative connotation in general. Like, people are like, hentai. So, but the fandom is quite large for hentai.
Yeah, and if you look at the yaoi fandom, it always feels very young. Like, the yaoi fandom always feels young. True. Which is what makes it so paradoxical, that like it's all this stuff that's really meant for adults. But I know, like, I started consuming it when I was too young for it. Right. But like, that's historically how it's kind of viewed, is, you know, you're getting into this stuff way younger than you should. I don't know. I wasn't in any of those board meetings, because I probably would have made different decisions. Right. But it was actually, it was weird for me because it was actually watching the Maiden Rose OVA that made me realize that this was porn. Because there's this huge disconnect between reading it and like hearing the moaning and the wet noises and like beds creaking. It's like, oh, this is porn. This is a sex act. Right. Like, it was this huge, like, I felt dirty watching this OVA. Like, it's like, oh, well then, they're okay, boys. You know, like, it felt weird because like I had read that scene a million times and never had the same reaction to like watching it animated. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a sex act. This is a real sex act. Or real, it's fictional, but you know what I mean. Like, right, yes. So, yeah, yaoi is under the hentai umbrella. It's a triangle with yuri. I don't have all the answers as to why it's still as censored as it is. My gut is telling me, because I think a lot of these companies kind of inherently know that their audience skews way younger. Right. And I mean, they have ways to find, I mean, they can check, you know, like I feel like they probably know somewhere that their audience skews way younger. And it's also probably, I know some of it also is just like decency standards. Like, you can have some dick, but not that much dick. It just depends on the manga and such. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. as per usual. Always do. But realistically, plenty of BL get censored for lots of things, not just the dicks. Ages get moved around, subject matter gets softened, and there's just lots of different ways that things get censored. Antique Bakery is a pretty good example of that, going from manga to anime, where there are some things that are just like softened, or they aren't touched upon as heavily. That's a form of censorship through redaction. Yeah. So. That actually reminds me, and I feel like I've brought this up so many times, but the cornered mouse. Wait, what is it called? The cornered mouse dreams of cheese. Yes, the cornered mouse dreams of cheese, and then the follow up. God bless these English That's titles. One that I've mentioned so many times, where like it. You know, the manga came out, and then they were getting like a live action adaptation. And so because the live action adaptation was, of course, going to be a wider censored, because going to a wider audience. So they were like, it's going to be changed a lot. So they actually asked the mangaka, or the mangaka ended up basically redoing certain things to make the manga match more with the live action drama. Now, from what I understand, in the English translation, we have the uncensored or unchanged
version, as far as I know, because I remember seeing like whoever, like a Seven Seas is the publisher, the English translation publisher, and they like were very much like, no, we have not changed anything on ours, but just letting y'all know there this has been changed. So I can see that, because it's like, yeah, it's a wider audience, and they want to, I mean, the whole point of a business, any business, is to make money, regardless of the business.
Right.
The point of it is to make money.
Right.
So of course it does make sense to censor some things if you're trying to get to a wider audience. I think that it can be frustrating because it's a slippery slope.
Absolutely. I think there's plenty of times where things have gotten censored and it just feels unnecessary.
Yeah.
But
like
then
cuss words or something.
Some cuss words.
Yeah.
Some cuss words. But like, yeah, there are plenty of times where it just feels like you didn't do anything by censoring this. So like we mentioned, we alluded to 4Kids earlier, and for listeners who aren't aware, 4Kids was a publishing and translation and licensing company in the U.S. that was really, really good about bringing anime from Japan to America, but they censored the fuck out of it.
They really did.
To the point of just butchering a lot of these anime now in hindsight. In hindsight, these anime were butchered. They did it for One Piece, Naruto, and Sailor Moon. And in hindsight, yeah, there's no point in watching any of the 4Kids versions.
No, absolutely not.
These are as far away from the original source material as you can get. They also did it to card captors, because I remember Yukito and Toya are just good friends. I think that was the issue with 4Kids. It was like, it felt very selective.
Yeah.
Because,
and it's based on whose standards? You know, like the people, like, just like that group of,
that
small
group of
people.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, and that's the thing with a lot of censorship, is that it usually, so like in Boys Love, in the yaoi space, like you're erasing the dicks, but like we still know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's a mystery. It's not like, you know, you took out some shading in a vein and now it's like, oh, I guess they're just waxing a surfboard.
Right.
Like, I have no idea what's going on now.
That's what boggles my mind. It's like we know what's, like, you may as well just have the mangaka just do a fade to black scene then. Like, because
Let's put an X over
what's
the
the
page.
point?
Right.
Yeah. Like, if, like, I could,
like, we can still in tune what happened. We still know.
You can still see everything else. Like, you can see, like, freaking juices coming out, like, self-lubricating buttholes. You know, you
Which
can
are
still
not a
see.
thing.
It's not a thing at all. It is in BL or in yaoi. They think it is because it's women. It's women drawing things that when they don't, they're not men.
Women don't have self-lubricating models.
We have self-lubricating vaginas, though.
Yeah, but our butts don't self-lubricate.
But the butthole is supposed to be a representation of the vagina, right? In BL or in yaoi, like,
what heteronormative shit have you been reading?
A bunch of like, it's all heteronormative. They always, like, that's what, like, the uke is like the feminine one, and so they have the butthole. They use the butthole like it's a freaking vagina, and it's not. It's weird. It's not the same.
It's not the same.
It doesn't feel the same. They don't work the same.
No, they don't.
They're both great, but they don't function the same way.
They do not. They do. Oh my god.
And it's just, it bothers me. Okay, that's like,
no, you're entitled to it. I'm not mad at you. I'm not,
because I'm like, freaking get some KY jelly, please. Like, pull that shit out, because no one's butthole.
If I could get like 3 pages of foreplay in a boy's love, I'd be the happiest person on earth.
You know what? That's fair.
Like, if I could get like just like 3 pages of like,
instead of just people, they just go in.
They just
like,
throw that uke on the dick.
Like, they just sit on it, and I'm just like, I can't. Listen, I have a self-lubricating vagina, and even I can't just sit on a dick immediately.
Yeah, I'm not pole vaulting on anyone's dick.
Yeah, you have to, like, get it.
If I could get like just 3 pages of like honest foreplay, where like you have to go like find the drawer that the condoms are in,
right, or the lube,
forget. Or both,
please.
Yeah, or where you have to like ask if your partner has an allergy.
But to be fair, that's us wanting too much realism.
Yeah, that's us wanting way too much realism
in fantasy.
In what is essentially a sexual power fantasy.
Exactly. So, see, even we do it. Even we have been guilty of.
But we're not screaming at anyone. Like we haven't like shaken down. Like we're not yelling at Fumi Yoshinaga. I demand a scene where someone gets lube.
We're not getting on Twitter and adding people.
We're not yelling at fucking. We're not tagging June in like 30 like hate posts about it.
Right.
Like, we're just
listen. Don't even get me started on people who do that. It's not necessarily in the BL yaoi fandom, but the shoujo fandom. Let me tell you, I feel like some of these publishers just out of spite, they're like, you know what?
Acknowledge, delete.
Yep. And it's like, oh, when they're like, hey, send in these surveys, I feel like they keep track of who. They probably don't, but they're like, you know what? I recognize this name. Delete.
It's like, oh no, we lost
request
your order.
Denied.
It's like, oh no, your order's missing somewhere. Ooh. Heard you talking shit on Twitter at 3 o'clock.
Right. So just because you talk shit about us not giving you what you want,
right? It's like,
you ain't gonna get shit now.
We heard you talking shit. But typically, censorship works that once a manga is licensed in English, the translators and publishers will work on censoring. So that's on Sublime, typically, before that's on the mangaka. Now, some of them will kind of self-censor, or they just don't draw as much. Here's a good litmus test. If you see lines over the dick, that's usually a scanlation sign, because they took it from Raw and then uploaded.
Oh,
but if you see like the fuzzy, that's usually a sign that it was taken from a publishing house. So there's your quick tip. Pun intended.
Because, usually what I've seen is like the lightsaber.
Yeah, the lightsaber. So that's typically a more professional like editing job.
Right.
But if you just see like lines and stuff, that's usually a scanlator who's translated or is pulling from raw manga pages.
Right. So that's interesting though. If I were a scanlator, why would I bother censoring it in the first place? Because aren't people who are into scans some of the most like loud about not liking censorship?
So most of them at this stage, I think, are just kind of doing it out of habit.
Okay.
Every once in a while, those scans would be sold back in the day.
Okay.
So I think at this stage, it's just sort of perpetuating something that's always been done. It's a weird thing, but it's also, I think, to pass like some sites' decency checks, because every once in a while, sites will get scrubbed, and it's like, that's a lot of everything.
Right.
And depending on like your domain and stuff like that, you could get flagged for terms of service violations. So a lot of like scanlator sites have that issue of domains and housing.
Right.
Because if there's just like, it's not that you can't have a site full of that, but like if you're using a certain hosting service, they might not be okay with it.
Okay. Right.
So at this stage, I think a lot of it's sort of perpetuating something that we've been doing for 1,000 years. But, like, the bird migrates. We don't know why. It just does.
Right, yeah.
So I think it might be some of that, but also probably making sure that, like, your terms of service aren't ever violated. Because, that's the thing with sites.
Even sites that utilize scans. I guess everyone has more.
Because that's the thing, is that just because the site hosts scans doesn't mean that their hosting provider knows that or is okay with it.
Right.
So like if your hosting provider is like WordPress or GoDaddy or something like that, they might not know what you're doing with that site. That's the thing. So they might not be okay with it.
Right. Interesting. See, that's a very
Yeah. Again, Amanda does this for a living. Oh, so
I'm like, I'm learning stuff.
There is debate to be had on censorship because of changed storylines and plot points. That does continue to beef up the discussion on piracy.
Yeah.
Because that is one thing that I think I mentioned during our piracy episode, which is still our least listened to episode. Still mad about that.
Yeah.
I'm still mad about it. Go listen to our piracy episode. I think it's good. I think it's one of our best.
I think it's great too, because I think we did a pretty good job of like
having a nuanced conversation about it, which is what no one wants to do.
Right. Exactly.
But it does add to that conversation about piracy, because a lot of things do get changed or softened. And I do think you are losing something in the narrative. So, like, that line that I sent you from Twittering Birds Never Fly about wanting a caseless wiener for breakfast, that apparently isn't in the movie.
Oh.
Right. Now, some people might not think there's a problem with that.
Right.
And on the surface, I don't think there's a problem with that.
Right.
But out of all of the vile shit that leaves Yashiro's mouth, we're censoring that. So that to me is a bit of a portent of, now I don't know what translation choices were made. Or what editing choices were made. Because Yashiro says a lot worse than that.
Oh, yeah.
In daylight.
Right.
But if you edit that, what else is edited?
Right.
And a lot of times you won't notice those little translation censorship things unless you already have a really, really solid footing in the source material, which, not to sound gatekeepery, most people don't.
Right, yeah.
So if you are coming into this for the first time and you don't know any better, then you're going to accept this narrative as writ. And oftentimes, that's just not true.
Right.
A lot of things get softened. A lot of things get changed.
Right. And I would even say that just from my perspective, and you can tell me, if I'm incorrect, but it seems like the majority of like anime/manga fans in the US are people who they're more likely to, like, anime seems to do better basically here. And so there are a lot of people who will jump into something, they'll watch the anime and never even touch the manga, like you said, so they're not really familiar with what had happened in
or honestly manga. Knowing multiple translations of manga, because anytime again it's coming over legally, there's still probably changes that are being made.
Oh yeah.
Localization is, I think, one of the best forms of censorship, and localization is basically making something more local. So, like, there's a whole group of people that are just localization translators of, like, taking things that sound too Asian and make it more American. Right. Because Americans are fucking stupid, I guess. And we wouldn't understand some concepts of things that are different in different countries. Cough.
Right.
So, like, Funimation has a huge thing with localization. So they will throw in a lot of things to make stuff sound more American.
Right.
Which mostly includes them using a lot of, like, meme language. And it pisses off fans a lot.
Yeah.
But unless you have multiple translation sources of things, you're probably going to miss it. One of the other examples I have for that is Axis Powers Italia. And there's a scene where... So Italia is personified countries. Do not talk about whether Scandinavia and the world did it first, because they did, and we all know. Shut up. We're not here about that. Whereas basically it's World War II, 3 personified countries. There are other historical periods, but the main bulk of the series are during World War II. So northern Italy gets captured by England. I think it's like England and America. World War II stuff. And they're like, hey, tell us about Germany. We want the tea on Germany. And, like, he's listing off all these things, like Germany being weird, and it's like, I even saw some of his porn. One of it had dogs in it. Like, that's, like, a line that, like, gets thrown out because he's talking really, really fast. And if you're reading the subs, it's just like, oh, okay, that's a weird thing to throw out there. But then you get, like, the Funimation translation, and that's not in there.
Oh.
So you only know that if you have, like, this weird memory of, honestly, watching this fan translated, because that was in the raw scan of the manga, because it was in the raw scan of the webcomic, which Hidekaz made as a racist joke when he was in New York.
Oh.
So if you know the raw scan or the raw translations, you know that joke. If you've only been consuming the Funimation legal, you don't know that joke is in there.
Right.
So it's like this weird contextualized memory of like, you know it's there, but no one else knows what you're talking about.
Right.
Because all the other casuals have only seen the Funimation one.
Right. Well, and it makes me wonder, like, that actually leads me to the question of, like, how, okay.
Yes.
If you are reading something, if you don't know what you're missing out on.
Yes.
Is it really a quote unquote bad thing? Because I think of it like this. So for me personally, because we already know that I don't read scans, blah 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 blah.
Yes.
Blah. And I also don't speak Japanese, or I'm just not familiar with that. So for me, like, for all I know, I could be reading whatever and have no context of like what it was supposed to be like, or what the maybe the mangaka's original intent was, or whatever. I still end up enjoying the series.
Sure.
But like, is that way for everyone? Because I know, like, I still enjoy it, because I go into it kind of knowing, like, more than likely, yeah, there's going to be things that are changed, because that's just the nature. That's the nature of translating works a lot of the time. Even with, like, novels, it's kind of like, eh.
But it doesn't have to be. So,
right, yeah.
Here's the counter. And I come at this as a writer and a reader. I think anything that changes plot and it's not necessary, I think is bad.
Okay.
And I use necessary very loosely, because again, like, I do understand that, like, sometimes this stuff is intense. Sometimes this stuff just does not fit sensibilities. But like, I think if it's fucking with plot, you need to not do this. And oftentimes it is. And I think only to make this like semi-political, I think of it like the news. I would never get my news from just one source.
Right.
Ever.
Oh gosh.
Right. And I will not insert whatever source you probably think this brown deviant gets their news from, but I would never just get my news from one source.
Right.
I tend to think of manga a little bit that way.
Okay.
There are a lot of things that just get, for lack of a better word, lost in translation, but it's stuff that's important. And a lot of things tend to get just smoothed over, and it's bad. Like, it's taking something. So, like, the hallmark example for this to me is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where Prince Lang is running away from whoever the fucking Amestris is fucking with him. And the situation that he's about to be thrown in jail for some bullshit reason.
Right.
And it comes down to basically he doesn't have his traveling documents on him.
Right.
Funimation took that and translated it to he's an illegal alien. And they go out of their way to use the word illegal alien. Almost like Funimation's in Texas.
Right.
So here's why that's a problem. It's contextually not true. And it softens his narrative. He's a literal prince.
Right.
He's not an illegal alien.
Right.
His papers are in his other pants. Like,
right.
But you're using a term that has a much stronger meaning here in the U.S. And you've now changed the context of the narrative.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Or to make it about BL, Gravitation had that problem where originally a lot of the ages were much more exaggerated. So, like, the age gap between Yuki and Suichi was much more significant than it ended up being when it got released.
Okay.
Just because, I guess, to some readers, it was a little bit gross.
Well,
I didn't have a problem with it, but I'm also gross. I'm also gross, so it's okay. But that changes the dynamic of their relationship when you have this kid who's almost more of an ingenue, who is younger, who is giving up more to this older man. It changes a lot of the dynamic of their relationship rather than them being more on equal terms. It also then makes it harder to excuse a lot of Suichi being dumb. Because for him to be as old as he is and still be such an idiot, it feels a little bit weird. It makes complete sense if the ages were the same and he's really only supposed to be 18 or 19 years old.
Okay. Right.
So you've kind of fundamentally have taken away something from the narrative and you've moved things around and you've kind of erased over some of those edges that made sense.
Right. I almost think, so you had mentioned, like, especially as a writer, I think that is a very important key, because when I do think about censorship within manga or any writing, but we're talking about manga, so, or I do wonder about the mangaka in Japan when they find out, like, okay, there, somebody in America wants to license this series, like, surely there is a worry about, like, how
butchered is this going to be?
Yes, like, is my original, like, not idea, but yeah, like, is the context going to be changed? Like, is my work going to be changed? The meaning behind this work going to be changed for this audience? And so that's kind of where I really don't like the idea of censorship, because it's changing something that someone maybe they had it's something that they made, and they may have had this intent. And like you said, with translations or censorship, it can really affect the narrative and what people are getting out of it. Right. So what if the mangaka is just like, I don't really want people to get that out of it, because I want people to get this out of it. So I could see that being really
So I don't think that anyone who publishes is naive enough to think that everything they wrote is just print.
Yeah.
And there probably is some negotiation, but there's also a lot of things that aren't negotiable, because at the end of the day, it has to be marketable.
Right. Because, again, money. Like,
yeah, at the end of the day, it has to be marketable. So enough people had an issue with Suichi being that young that they changed the ages for the first print of the manga in the U.S.
Right.
The doujins leave it, so it's weird. So the doujins are like their own canon AU, I guess.
Right.
Gravitation has like the weirdest timeline that they've broken so many times that I don't even have the energy to talk about right now. Oh. But yeah, like I don't think that any creator assumes that everything that I wrote unfettered is just going to go off into that good sweet night.
Right.
And I do think that they get some choices into that, but a lot of it, no, is not up to them. And there are great interviews of mangaka who were like, that's not what I wrote.
Yeah.
There are some great interviews with mangaka who were like, the fuck is this?
Like,
I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. Which is why it's great now that you're starting to see more collaboration between mangaka and the houses in Japan and the houses in the US working together. And you get some of these great newer series that don't have as many of those issues because you have the Japanese team being like, hey, cut this the fuck out.
Right.
We said these words and we mean these words.
Right.
Because a lot of it also was just agency. It was they did not have the say. So a lot of it back in the day was it gets licensed, poof, it's gone. It gets off into the ether and I get my royalties check, a couple years later. Right. But now there's a lot more collaboration between the East and the West, for better or worse, because we're now starting to influence them more.
Yeah.
Fine, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's always been
sticky
there to some degree.
Yeah, I think we're doing it too much, though.
Yeah.
I think certain companies are doing it a little too much.
Also, I do want, because we were talking about localization earlier. I've definitely seen, not recently, but just over time, I've seen a lot of like discourse around localization and people getting really upset about it to a degree that kind of made me, I think I'm low-key, there's something wrong with me, because I really sometimes I just don't care about certain things. Like, it's just something that I don't care that much about, that I would be like yelling about it on Twitter. Well, but I kind of see.
So yeah. So I get mad about localization because, again, like, it often softens the narrative and it also assumes that Americans are stupid. And while many of us are, not all of us are. So it tends to it tends to try to find explanations for things that don't need explaining. So a hallmark example of localization being stupid is in Pokemon there's a Alolan Raichu.
Oh.
Which one were you thinking?
I was thinking of there was a scene where I forget who, but somebody was holding an onigiri.
Mm-hmm. The jelly
they
donuts?
changed it into a
yeah, that's a 4Kids localization. But a newer one is Alolan Raichu, where like the Pokedex entry for him in Japan is that he basically like gets so zenned out surfing that he becomes a psychic type.
Oh.
Yeah, and like that's cool. But like the American Pokedex says that like he got psychic powers from eating too many pancakes. And like that's just like a dumb localization thing, assuming that like that Americans wouldn't get that.
I don't get the pancake thing.
Yeah, like the pancake doesn't make any more sense. But sure. But like that's like a dumb localization thing that just really flattens the narrative of like you have these surfing Pikachus and these surfing Raichus that get so zen that they like change type. That's amazing and super cool.
I don't pancake?
Yeah. Magic
That's
pancakes.
Stupid.
But like like there's a lot of like dumb localization stuff that like we assume that like Americans wouldn't get. And again, like to bring it back to like being a guest in Japan's house, I remember reading the Inuyasha manga and they still had all the suffixes in. And they would give you a little glossary at the end so you know the suffixes.
Yeah. I guess I'm just not so just like, localization.
And I get being that invested in stuff, but like I'm used to... So like I do that like on calls with friends.
Yeah.
I don't yell into the void of the social internet very often. And when I do, it's like one-off and like snarky. But like I get that patch out localization like on calls with friends or on podcasts because content or in videos. Like I'm not just like screaming into the void hoping that like Nintendo hears me, because that's not what it's about.
Right.
It's just, I think it's about targeting that angst and like doing something with it. So like for me, yeah, like the whole issue with censorship and localization, it puts another feather in my pirate cap. It makes it adds one more of those little feathers that it's like, I'm not quite ready to take this off yet, because I've seen what some of these companies do to works that I love and I don't like it all the time. I've seen what happens to works that matter to me, and I've known that that's not how that line is. And there's something that it's really disheartening. It sucks because you learn it a certain way and it's just not what you expected.
Right.
But yeah, like for me, it's never going to be enough to like start yelling at anyone. Like I'm not going to start yelling at Sublime. I'm not going to start yelling at June. I'm not going to start yelling at, Tokyo Pop. Right. Because they're trying to be a thing again.
Right. Well, oh gosh, they're really trying.
They're really trying.
They've almost got me a couple times because some of their BL titles, I'm like, man, that looks...
Every once in a while. Every once in a while, they'll try to... It's like, hey.
It makes me so angry because I'm like...
It's like having like a really crappy ex. Like Tokyo Pop is everyone's Jean-Baptiste Heavens who like won't go away and just like pops up every once in a while like home. Like
that occasionally gave good enough dick that you were just like, you know what, maybe.
Yeah, every once in a while, like just left you dicked down so good that you were like, I might answer the phone.
I might want to hop on that again. That's what Tokyo Pop is.
And then they push you on a staircase. Then they push you on a fucking staircase, and it's like, why? But why? I love that we just like dated ourselves instantly. I know we talk about being old every episode, but like I think that was the one that we're both like, remember when Tokyo Pop was a thing?
Yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, I know how you feel about Fruits Basket, but I still have like Fruits Basket. I have the Tokyo Pop version because that was like that was my first manga, and also the first manga I completed because like I followed it through from beginning to end. That's so sweet. And it's all but that speaking of censorship and translation decisions and things like that,
with Fruits Basket.
I had heard, granted, like I was reading it when it was first releasing, and for the most part at the beginning of the release, and in English. I didn't learn until like I think Yin Press put out like a collector's edition or something. And I've been tempted to buy that edition because I've heard that the translation is better because it is more true to whatever, true to the story, I guess. Which, again, I have no frame of reference because I've only ever read it in English. I don't speak Japanese. So I think that's where I get hung up on. It's like, I have no frame of reference to even know if something is changed.
So for me, I've never read it in Japanese, but I trust my scan sources and I trust their translators because, again, and we talked about this in the piracy episode, a lot of fan translators aren't just dumb horny teenagers. Like they know what they're doing,
which is, I'll be honest, has always typically been my
that's
perception.
not true. Yeah, that's not true. So
most of it, so I can admit that I definitely have that bias,
and that's fine because like a lot of because especially like in the conversation that people who are anti-pirate, the conversations that they have about it, they all make it sound that way because you have to make it so much more demonstratively bad. Because, and this is where I probably sound a little bit arrogant, sometimes there's no excuse to not. Like, if you really have issues with the way that some of these companies are run, which realistically some people do. I know I've looked at some of the books and I don't like where some money is going and how some people have been continued to be supported that we're not going to talk about on this podcast. If you really wanted to make an argument for piracy, you could do it. So I think a lot of the people on the anti side for piracy, they kind of have to draw at straws sometimes. So they have to flatten the narrative and make it sound way worse. When really, like, I'm not going to say it's not that bad, but it's definitely like the bad that you think it is not what it is.
Interesting.
Or like my favorite.
Sorry, I just choked on my spit. I tried to breathe.
You poor thing.
Anyways, go ahead.
So like, yeah, like I think especially in the boys love space, you see almost like the litmus test to a lot of this stuff, that so much of this is changed and is adjusted, and because a lot of the stuff that we're getting now is older, you are getting more fans that are like, wait a minute, that's not how that was.
Yeah. Because
I remember how that was.
Right. That's okay. Because like a lot of those series that were older that were getting like English or official releases now, people had read them maybe in scans, or even maybe they read them. Maybe they can read Japanese and they read. Yeah,
maybe they have that one friend who was living in Japan. Like, they have a couple scan sources. Maybe they watched this illegally when they were in college, like I did. Right. You know, and so it's like, wait a minute, I have a memory of this, and that's not what was said. That's not what was done. Or honestly, it just could be like a second or third reprint. Like, I think. Right. Yeah. Like, there are some manga that are like, wait a minute, this is a newer version of this manga, and that's not, like, there's a difference just being like these 2 volumes of what is said. In the end, if you want to consume your BL legally, you're gonna have to deal with some censorship. Most of the houses do some form of censoring, whether it's softening dicks or changing lines or moving up ages. They're gonna do some form of censoring. So if you want your BL legally, which we've talked ad nauseum about piracy, you're gonna have to deal with it. And your mileage on that may change. I still, as often as I can, prefer to go the legal route. So if we ever get the 3rd volume of Maiden Rose, I'm fucking buying it. I don't care if it's censored. Like, when we finally get that 4th volume of Twittering Birds Never Fly, I'm fucking buying it. So that wraps up censorship. I hope that you guys had an elucidating time. I'm not going to say a good time. It was kind of heavy. So that was censorship. Aisha, where can the people find you?
Y'all can find me at MommaLuvsManga on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Not yet OnlyFans. I keep mentioning it at the end of every podcast. One of these days. But y'all won't see my face, though. I have a plan. Like, it's going to be... I've actually decided who my target audience will be.
Just legs and feet.
What?
Just feet and legs. That's all. I've been on the side of TikTok where it's like women selling like everything that they've owned. Where it's like, oh, these are the shorts that I just took a run in, $300. It's like,
that's what. Listen, y'all about to. Yo, listen, y'all think I'm insufferable now? Just wait till I start making all this money on OnlyFans.
Selling socks.
Selling
used socks.
Underwear that I only wear underwear for 1 week a month. I will sell those.
I almost sold my gloves to a hand fetishist once.
See, we are wasting our potential.
Every man has a price, and I know what mine is, and it has a fair amount of zeros.
I'm about to listen. I know there's people that have fetish for small boobies. Please believe. I'll shake my little mosquito bites.
I had another great moment of I bought new bras today, and I'm like, this cup is like the size of my face.
It's like the size of both of my butt cheeks.
like this one cup is like the size of my whole head. And this holds my titty. Speaking of titty, you can find me at AichiYume in most places.
Yes.
And Amanda actually to listen to me whinge about media. I just finished up a post on fan fiction, which actually leads us to what I think might be our next topic, which is fan works in doujins.
Yay!
Something that we both care a lot about, and
yes.
Something that we're both heavily invested in. If you would like to support this podcast, you may do so at anchor.fm/the Yaoi Shelf. You do not need to support us financially. There are plenty of other ways that you can support us, like writing reviews or sharing with your friends. A retweet costs exactly $0.
Yes.
But if you do wish to support us financially, we do greatly appreciate it. As of now, we have no goals for it, but maybe we can work on that.
Yeah. I mean, if we start getting more people wanting to do that, we can. Yeah. Or we could do it before. Nothing
matters. We also have a shop with all these kinds of fun designs. If you would like merch, you can do
so at Redbubble. Like this one?
Yep. You can do so at Redbubble/the Yaoi Shelf because capitalism exists.
Also,
we can't destroy capitalism. Might as well indulge.
I mean, and to be fair, I have bought so much of our own merch.
Yeah, I think like you're the second highest sale. Is just you throwing money into this podcast, which I'm perfectly fine with.
I mean, I gotta contribute how I can. If I'm not gonna read the outline,
if you're not gonna read the outline, you can at least leave me a tip by buying my art.
Exactly. See, look at me.
Fucking Daddy Warbucks. Useful. I've never been to one of your baseball games, and here's a penny. I missed your recital, little one, but here's a nickel.
Money. Here's $5.
Throw some money at child. Yeah, I missed your school pageant, sweetie. Sorry about that. Go buy yourself something nice who wipes tears with $20 bill.
Here you go. Here's some money.
Go get yourself something nice. Pat on the butt.
Here's a gift card to Target.
I would actually.
Right. As soon as I said it, I was like, actually.
I just got my cousin for his birthday a gift card to Outback Steakhouse, and I'm like,
actually,
what the fuck am I doing?
I never go, I don't ever go to Outback anymore on my own money. But if someone gives me a gift card,
we're black. We don't go to Outback Steakhouse.
Please believe, if somebody gave me a gift card to Applebee's, I would even go to Applebee's.
If someone gave me a gift card, unless I'm allergic, I'm going.
Right, because
unless it's like Texas Roadhouse, which I can't go to.
Wait, you can't. Oh, because of peanuts.
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. Because Texas Roadhouse.
Oh, my family just brings me rolls. Like, they know better. Like, they just bring me, like, a carton of rolls.
But isn't that kind of... Well, as long as they don't touch the
table.
The nuts.
Yeah. Aisha, why are you like this?
I didn't even... Okay, why are you like this? Because that's not what even... That's not what I was even thinking. Aisha? Okay, low-key, I was. Okay.
I know you were. That's why I called you out, ho. I know you were. So our next episode will be on fan works and doujins. As always, thank you for listening. By the time this episode comes out, I should be fully recovered and sound more like myself. Thanks for listening, guys. See you next time.
Bye.